Thank you and welcome to our webinar today, the Infor SunSystems V1 user webinar, which is all about a piece of technology called V1, which is a document management and document capture technology that's integrated to Infor SunSystems. So on the webinar today, just so you're all aware, we've got a group of our clients that use SunSystems. Some of you might have attended our seminar last month and are following up with the demonstration today, and some of you might have been attending fresh. So we endeavour to give you an overview of V1 today. So just before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. We would love for you to submit any questions you have along the way, and we'll dedicate some time at the end to answer them. So in your control panel, the GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see that there's a section in there where you can write down your questions and we'll answer. And if we don't get through all of them, we'll certainly follow up with you one-on-one with them. We are recording this session, which means that it will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll send you a link. That way you can re-watch it or share it amongst your colleagues that weren't able to attend the webinar today. So my name's Rebecca Gatehouse, for those that I haven't met before. I've been working with SunSystems for a little bit over 11 years now. But joining me is Kitty, who's worked with it for a lot longer than I, and is one of our senior consultants at Professional Advantage, and has a very long history working with SunSystems and is now a V1 consultant as well. And she's going to be doing the part that you all registered for, and she's going to be showing you some components of V1 today. So just a bit of an introduction that I'll run through just to give you a little bit of background on V1, and we're obviously going to do a demonstration and then dedicate some time at the end. We do, in between parts of this, we've got two sort of polling questions that we're going to put to you. It enables us to get you a little bit of interaction, but enables you to get some insight from the group that are on the webinar today with some, I guess, some of the challenges around the AP side of your business. So organisations that we work with, and I see this on a day-to-day basis, are facing a lot of process challenges. Now, these are quite broadly across the organisation, but specifically or obviously focused in around procurement and AP automation in this webinar today. And there's that constant challenge of, saving time and lowering cost, and in particular reducing the amount of time spent around AP at the end of month. And really what we're trying to do here is get more of the low value add, high volume tasks that happen around AP, get machines to do them for us so that it's kind of freeing up our skilled employees to engage with the business and do other work with the business. But also about spreading the process across the month so that there's not this bottleneck of AP and catching up on AP processing at the end of the month. We've got other challenges around, obviously people are more mobile these days, they're not desk bound, and we can't rely on them being there to do processing and participate in the process, and transparency and audit have obviously become quite paramount. So the first poll question we're going to run today is, I guess, to get a bit of a gauge from the group and share this intel anonymously about how long do we think we spend at the end of the month finalising our AP processing. Is it 10 plus days, which hopefully there's not too many of those? Is it less than 2 days or somewhere in between? So if you could answer those within the next second or so, then we'll share the results of those so you can get a good feel about, I guess, where you're sitting. And the primary reason for this question is so that once you've seen V1, you can get a handle on, well, if a lot of these processes are going to be automated for me, then I've got the potential to free up some days at the end of the month and therefore report quicker to the business. Unfortunately, we have most within 3 days, not at the upper end, but still, if you could save, 2 to 3 days at the end of the month and report, potentially 2 or 3 days quicker, then that's going to be a great outcome for the finance function of your organisation. So the objective of the session is to give you an understanding of the benefits that automating the accounts payable within SunSystems using V1 can have on your business. So looking at, well, a lot of the process at the moment involves manual data entry and manual approvals. How can we streamline that process through the application of some technology? How can I get people accessing the information without having to ask for it? We want to reduce costs around that manual process. And of course, free up some of our time of our team to be able to go and do more analysis and more engagement with us. So V1, as I said right at the start, is a document capture OCR technology. Many of you might be familiar with the OCR terminology. Why have we picked V1? I mean, there's a number of players in that market, and there's a couple of key reasons. The one is that we have a strategic partnership with them, but importantly, they have a strategic partnership with Infor, and Infor are obviously the author of SunSystems. So it's important we have technology that's aligned there with versioning and roadmaps and development. It gives us the flexibility. It doesn't matter what version of Sun you're on. We can use and implement V1. And also they have a long track record with integration with SunSystems and more recently with iPOS, which is a procurement module. But they've been working and integrating with Sun for quite some time, so it's a mature, proven application. What are some of we talked about some of our process challenges, but what are the specific challenges that we face and the solutions that we want to look for around our AP process and the automation pieces that we want really not to be doing a lot of work with manually with, using human resources. So obviously the obvious one is we want to reduce manual data entry. Where possible, we want a machine to be capturing data and processing it in our system for us. And these things are the things that Kitty is going to show in the demonstration. If we require a purchase order number on an invoice and we don't want to pay it without that, we can have the system do those checks for us as they come into the business, not relying on people to do that. Dealing with things like if we get multiple invoices, are they duplicates or are they for different purchase orders? I want to be able to add lines easily if there's extra lines. I want to be able to store invoices quite easily and automatically, not having to go somewhere else and scan and save. Obviously view things, and not just view things from the V1 interface, but view things where I work from. So view things from within SunSystems or from within Q&A. I want to be able to add supporting documents that support it might be a business case for the procurement of an asset. And then I want to be able to search for documents easily and go somewhere where other people can easily go and find the documents without relying on either somewhere manual or relying on the finance team to find them. So if we look at what that looks like in terms of a bit of a workflow around that supplier invoice automation, and it really falls into that digital transformation piece that most of our companies that we talk with talk about wanting to achieve. One of the obvious contenders for digital transformation is supplier invoice automation, because it can be very high volume and very manual. So we're going to receive an invoice, ideally from an email, PDF, which is best practice, but we can receive them via paper, and then we're going to scan the paper invoices in using just our multifunction scanners and photocopiers. Then we're going to capture it, and this is where V1 really shines, in that the capture part is going to be largely automated. So it's going to read the data from the invoice and recognise it and validate it to SunSystems. Then we're obviously wanting to get an approval code and get an approval for the invoices as you would currently do manually. So there's a step in there which Kitty will show. Then we want to store it somewhere safe and secure so that we can go and find it whenever we need it and then post into SunSystems. So you can see even the posting into SunSystems can be automated, obviously with the right validations to give you comfort, but posted in an automated way. So I'm going to hand over to Kitty now, thank you Kitty, who's going to run through the demonstration to show you the automated process of managing the supplier invoices through to posting.
Thanks Rebecca, and good afternoon everyone. My name is Kitty. I'm going to take you through to the demonstrations of V1 SunSystems. So I'd just like to go back to this invoice automation slides just to go through what I'm going to cover in my demonstrations. So the first 4 or 5 steps, depending on whether it's an emailed invoice or if we've received in a hard copy to scan it, it all starts from the capture component of V1. So this is where we do all the data validations or where the document capture happens using the OCR technology. And then there will be an approval process within V1 as well. So there's a V1 authorized component that we set up all the rules for the approval matrix, and it determines who the approver are, and then they can either approve by email or they can go into the authorized module to make changes to that. And documents get archived before it get posted to SunSystem. So the majority of validations, approval, or doing all the coding, if you like, with all the analysis codes, are all done within V1 before these last steps that get posted to SunSystem. And it's all going to happen automatically. All right, so I'm just going to take you to a demonstration now. So I'll start off with the first step of getting the invoice in to show you the document capture. I'm going to demonstrate the part where I have 3 invoices example, but I'm going to move to a nominated folder here. So what's happening there is you see that they're starting to disappear because it's a real-time processing in V1 capture. So if I just refresh this now, you can see that the 3 invoices that I placed in that folder is now they're now sitting in the being process folder. So it's going through the checking. We'll cover this shortly. Okay. So I've got 3 sample invoices that I've placed them in a folder. It's done all the validations. So all of these have error, as I can tell here. And in this very first screen here, I can quickly view some information here. Say, okay, that's actually my supply code. So pick up the details from SunSystem. Let's pick up the supply code. It checks the ABN number that we have set up in SunSystems. And it's picking up the invoice number, invoice date, details, and obviously the amount, which business unit it's going into. So it's all set up initially. So depending on how you have SunSystem set up, I mean, it's quite common that we have clients running SunSystems on multiple business units. So where I was moving the files to a particular folder is usually specific for that business unit. So if we were to set this up, if it happened by an email, that will be a dedicated mailbox for the specific business units that will have all the invoices sent to. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So the first 2 examples that I have they have the same error message. Basically, it's complaining about the bank details. So there is actually a validation check against the bank details in Sun. So let's have a look. So I'm double clicking on one of these to have a look at the details. So it brings up the scan invoice. This is my PDF invoice. And on the right hand side, it actually tells me what fields are captured from that invoice using the OCR technology. So for example, if I click on the invoice number on the right hand side, so it's actually picking up the invoice number where it's highlighted in light green. So it's quite visible to say, okay, that's actually picking up the invoice number from the correct field. And if it doesn't, then we can quickly make changes here and it will actually remember next time. So when we get in, say, new invoices from a new supplier, there may be fields that, because the supply template, the invoice template could be different from each supplier. And sometimes it might not pick up the correct field, but that's something that we can teach the capture system here to say, okay, for example, that field is the invoice number, and then it actually remembers it next time. So from time to time, it actually gets better to remember all the fields that should get picked up in an invoice. So invoice date is the next one. It's got some smart build in it. It actually detects the date and it can read any date format. So you can see this particular one has got like a Word format, and even if it's in American format with month, day, year, it will be able to convert the date into the required format that's accepted by SunSystem. If we required a purchase order number check, say if we advise the supplier to put the PO number, like in this case, in the invoice, and we want the system to perform that validation check, we can set it up to say, make sure the PO number is filled in, or just error it so we can actually detect there is an error and review it and update accordingly. Net values, so picking up the value, total net value of the invoice, GST is picking up from there, and the gross values. So there is a check in the system just to make sure the gross value actually adds up from the net plus the tax value here. Okay, description picks up the description from first line. Okay, so here is where the error. Okay, if I have a look at this, so I quickly make a dummy field to say that BSB number, and obviously that is definitely incorrect. So just trying to test if the system is checking the BSB and the account number accordingly. And you can see here, it actually shows us the error message to say this sort code, this BSB, is actually different to what we've got in SunSystems. So that will be really handy if we just want to make sure when we pay the supplier that the bank details showing on an invoice is actually the one that we have on our record. And if not, let's say if the suppliers actually change the bank account details, and that's fine, but it's just an extra validation check to make sure we don't actually pay a different bank account here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take that out because I haven't actually got bank details on my invoice, and I'll just go check. So we'll just blank that out, and I'll say check. Okay, so now it's all good with the error. If I accept this, what you will see, if I refresh this now, is actually moved to the to be exported queue. Okay, so that is exactly the same error with the bank details, rejection of bank details. Fix this one up. So obviously this is for demonstration purpose that I'm doing this, and from time to time if there is these details were provided and if the check passed, then the status will be okay. You won't have to do this manually one by one. Now I go this, so it actually moved on as well. Okay, so before I move on to the next step to say, okay, it scanned the invoice, captured some fields, then there is the next step. Obviously we need to complete for the journal, like as if we were to enter the AP journal in Sun. But I just want to fix up this last one. Okay, this last example has actually got a different error on it. It's complaining about the gross value. It actually doesn't add up. So let's have a look to see what the error is. Okay, so if I have a look, it's a different invoice here. Okay, so we've got a net value of 1.32, so you can see that's capturing that field. The gross value is 1.45. But the error is the net and the GST tax value and the gross values do not agree. Okay, so it's missing the tax GST. So what I do is I can come here. This is one of what I was talking about. So we can teach the system to say, okay, here is actually where the GST field is, and it will remember it next time. So as I highlight on it, as you can see, it changes the background color to light green and actually populates the tax value here. So I'm going to hit check now. Okay, and it's accepted the value. Now I've got to fix up the bank account again. Check and check. Okay, all good, happy, accept. Okay, so I've got nothing on my queue now to be checked. So what it has done is it has moved those sample invoice, the capture of the data to the next stage, which is now going through the initial authorization. They call authorization, but it's actually the initial coding and doing all the checking. Minimize it and go into my authorizer, the coding authorizer that I've set up as the first level of approver. So okay, so I've got 3 entries there, which is the 3 sample invoices that we've looked at before. So let me just go into this one. So what it's done here is it's obviously trying its best to fill in as much details as possible, picking up the business unit, the document number, which is the invoice number, picking up the supplier, the value, net value of invoice, And you can see here from the grid, it's actually created the 2 lines for us here, okay? So it automatically calculates the GST because it knows that it's GST in our invoice, and we've actually preset the code for it. But the expense side, it's blank at the moment in the account code, yeah, because that kind of information, we wouldn't usually have that on a supply invoice, and it requires AP to enter the details. So if I just put in, say, 35300 as the general expenses, okay, so with that, so that's the account code that I will need to fill in, plus all the other analysis code, particular line. So I'm just going to fill in some coding here. I don't need any coding for my GST account because that's just a setup in Sun. That's not required. So just quickly fill that in. Now, I think a common questions that we have from clients is that it's quite possible or in a lot of cases that you would need to split your invoice by possibly cost center or project or any other segments that you might require. And as you can see, this one, when I put it here, it automatically populates and assumes the total value to be filled in there. So it just depends on how we configure it. Something like we can configure it like a button here to call copy line. So what it will do is once you fill in the first line, complete the first line, when you hit copy line, it actually copied the entire details of that line. So then it may be a case that you just have to change a particular project on the second line and amount accordingly. So there's no calculation component there. So if you're doing like a split of for 5 different cost centers, you will have to work out the split. Like in this case, it's $100. Then you can just copy 4 lines down and then change just the project code. Because if we were to do a new line, it actually starts with a blank line, and then you have to fill in everything again. Okay, I'm just going to save this for now and say, okay, I'm happy with the account code and all the coding that I have put in. And then what I do is I say, okay, I'm happy with that. I'm accepting that as the coding that I completed for this. And what it will do from now is actually routing to the next approver, okay? Depending on how it's set up, in this demonstration setup I have, is actually rerouting it based on the value of the invoice. Just quickly fill this in, and then we'll get on to 2 examples, and then we'll move on. You may not be required to fill in that many analysis code. It's just my example here. So if you use fixed asset register, you can also link to an asset code as well. So you can actually make it a journal that would update the fixed asset register. Okay, save, accept. Okay. All right, leave that there. So it's gone through, all gone. So nothing for the coder to do. Close that. I'm just going to have a look at, I think one of them has gone through to the high value authorized to see. Okay, so this one actually tells me that's based on the approval matrix setup. This has come to the high value approver for an approval, Lisa person. And so can open that up. So at this stage, usually, I suppose unless there is an error on it, usually they just do their checking, say, okay, happy with that, and they can click accept, okay? Now, as an approver, they actually get an email with the details of the invoice, and they can approve by an email. Just to quickly show you one of the examples, it looks like this. So they get like all the reference details, the total value, and then with the line listed in the email. And then what they can do is they have the option to say, okay, they want to accept, query, or reject. And so that's one button, one click away. there. So if they do need to query, or if they think that some changes required to be made, they actually need to click through here and put down the details of what they require to do. So you won't be able to update the changes by an email unless they actually log on to the authorized module. Okay, so once gone from there, let me have a look. I should have another one sitting under the normal approver. Okay, so I've got 3 there. If I just pick that up and oops, this one, going to accept that. So all good. So I've got 2. I'll leave the other 2 there. Okay, so just quickly have a look at the 2 examples that I've done before, just to show you with the view. This was the 2 examples that we have a look at, that one there. Okay, so it tells me that it's got an OK status, the high value one. Look at it before. It says it's sent to SunSystems. And this VG Xerox one is also sent to SunSystems. So at this stage, what it's done, it's created an XML file with all the invoice journal details. And depending on the configurations, you can upload that via transfer desk, or if you have your license for the automation, depending on the version of SunSystems you're on, if you have automation desk, then it's possible to schedule that running. So I've got that set up as a scheduling. Let me check. So it's going to run at 3:05. I'm just going to run that now. So what it's done, so it's created the XML file to folder, nominated folder, and put it all the invoices here. Once it's completed, it moves to the archive folder. So I can see these last 2 were the one that's been completed. So I'm going to go into Sun now. Just double check the code we have is the CBBC and CBAK. Okay, so I'm just going to show you firstly the journal. If I have a look at the from the creditor or the supply side, CBBC. Just look at current period, see if there's anything that gets picked up. Okay, that was the one coming from the system. So the 500, so 550 posted to the system. So if I go journal number, we can also see the 3 lines journals posted. Okay, so that was the creditor line, expense line, the code I filled in, GST code that was automatically populated, plus all the other analysis code. Okay, wasn't required. We must have switched them off in Sun so it can get posted. From here, I've actually got a button created under the inquiry screen. When I click on that, it actually takes me into the V1 document management and preview the invoice for me. So this is where all the documents get saved here in the document management system in V1. And I can actually make a view from here as a shortcut from SunSystems. Okay, so that would be the same if I was to look at the other one, the Fuji Xerox one. Same one here. If I look at the image, pick that up and show me the invoices, the invoice details here. Okay, that's a quick view. Okay, so that's from Sun as the drill down, and it is possible to create a similar shortcut in Q&A Excel or Q&A Executive, so then you can still view the document from there. Okay, so just before I finish that off, I'm just going to take you to the V1 document management system just to show you how you can also search your documents from here. So there is a component called Smart Retrieve. This is where all the documents get So I've got Sun purchase invoices and credit notes. From here, so I get some settings, so all these search criteria that I can put in to narrow down my search. But say if I just want to filter the business unit that I'm looking at, which is DEM, DEM, if I just go show results, I should be able to see 3 of those. Okay, so one of those I didn't get processed. I think processed the other 2, the 500, and I think if we do that, so it was a 500. Second one, no, I didn't process that one. I think it was this one, the Fuji Xerox. Yeah. So these are the 3 documents that we've got here. Now from here, you can also get some document information. See if I click there, actually give me a quick view, quick summary of all the details from this invoice. So who actually did the deposit of this invoice, the date, the type, and all the details about the value that you can see from here. Okay, close. Now, if we require to attach, say, supporting information to this invoice, we can also do this through, there's a smart deposit component. So we can go in here and just browse a document, any document, and you get a preview here, and all you have to do is just to say, okay, this is a supporting purchase invoice document, and you just link it to the invoice number that you processed, and it will validate the suppliers and attach documents together with the original invoice. And then when you do that, when you come back here to view it, both viewing it from here or from the shortcut or from the button from Sun or Q&A, you will be able to see, say, both documents in there. Yes, so if I come back here, if I did attach the document, when I do a search again, once it's all saved, when you click on it, then you will be able to see that like as a next page to the document. So it just makes the search a lot easier, and you can view, I suppose, more details from here as well with a quick summary of all the fields that it picked up from that invoice. So that was a sample email the authorizers will receive, which they can authorize it by the email. The validation rules at the capture stage, when we first place the invoices into that nominated folder, here are some samples validations that can be set up and which were set up in my examples. So it checks against the ABN number, suppliers. We had a look at the bank details. Is it possible to set up secondary ID if required? Something like the day checking, and say if invoice date is not actually older than 90 days, or if it's not a future invoice that has a day that's beyond today's day. Checks if a duplicate documents are already been processed in SunSystem. Also checks currency, if multi-currency is used, so it checks the currency if it's already been defined in SunSystem. The amount balances, make sure net plus GST is gross, otherwise it'll flag as an error for user to review and check. And I went through that with the date conversion, so it's got some inbuilt smarts in there. It reads any day format basically and converts into a format that is accepted by SunSystem. I'm just going to pass this back to Rebecca. Thank Rebecca.
Thank you, Kitty. Thanks for that. So we are going to just skip straight to the questions and answers so that we can get through some of the questions that have come through. So, Kitty, can standard invoice details, for example, account codes, etc., be set for regular invoices?
We might be able to set it up based on at a creditor level.
Yeah, I believe that when invoices come in, if they're common, you can have default chart of account, default lines appear there for the coding.
Yeah, it's just like what we did with GST. So usually set at a supply level. Yeah.
At what point are the business rules checked, in V1 or only at the transfer desk stage? I'm assuming the Sun business rules.
Yes, so the Sun business rules only check at the point when the transfer desk kicks in. So V1 prepares the journal details in an XML file. It's at the point when the file gets imported by either manually by transfer desk or automations that it validates the business rules set up in Sun.
And you showed the posting into Sun. Can that be automated so that if it meets all the Sun business rules, I don't have to open transfer desk or run it?
Oh, yes, it was automated. I had the scheduling set up for 5 minutes, so I didn't want to wait for another 3 minutes. That's why I sort of kick it off to run it off manually. Otherwise, it would have, kick it off and run it and post it automatically to Sun without having to open up transfer desk.
And there was a question from quite early on. How does it manage if a supplier sends the same invoice through twice? Does it pick that up at
Yes,
the
so
V1
there's yes, from V1 side of things, when we at the document capture stage, when it comes in, it actually validates the invoice if it's a duplicate invoice. So that checks against the transaction reference field in SunSystem, and then if it's a duplicated one, it will actually reject and come up with an error.
Okay, and how does it know if you want to make sure you've got purchase order numbers on invoices? How does V1 know that an invoice should have a purchase order number on it?
So we defined a filter, if you like. So at each supply level, we actually specify whether the supply is a purchase or is a type that required purchase order matching. So that's all defined in Sun using a account analysis code, and that V1 picks up that field to determine the type, whether it's like a non-purchase order, so that would take it in as a new invoice, or whether it's one that requires purchase order number. And if it's one that requires purchase order number, that's where we can set up that check to ensure purchase order number is applied. If not, then we can review and send an email back to the supplier to say we can't really pay you until you supplied us with the PO number. So there's some sort of email template that's built in the system that you can use to route it back to the supplier, together with a copy of the invoice. Yep.
Oh, great. So another example of a machine doing it rather than a person. All right. Well, there were some other questions, but we're bang on time right now. So we will, for all the people that asked questions, we've got them in your names. So Kitty and I will work through those and we'll distribute them via your account management team to get those answers back to you. Just summing up, though, if we think about the process benefits that we want to try and achieve from the AP side of things. Hopefully the demonstration showed you that utilising technology like V1, where you're automatically capturing those documents and not manually doing it and then storing them, gives you these kinds of benefits. In particular, that value add, so freeing up people's time from non-value add tasks so that they can be deployed to engage with the business with tasks that add a little bit more value, but that visibility and traceability around the audit trail around purchasing, a very critical audit requirement these days. So they're just, I guess, a few of the process benefits that we see with implementations of V1, but just freeing up that manual time is quite critical. So we're a minute over. Who to contact? I'm sure all of you know the contact details for your Inside Account Manager or your Customer Success Manager. So they're very much looking forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions, I'm sure they'll reach out to you as well. If you're not sure or you know me, feel free to give me a call on my mobile or send me an email and I'll be able to assist with that. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and look forward to talking to you.
Thank you.